Hello and welcome to the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. We are back after another crazy week at Hallis Hall. Ho hum, par for the course. A little bit wild as always. We got to hear from Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles. We're gonna talk about that a little bit because we have not met with you guys since we heard them on Monday. We have a game to look forward to, or to preview at least. I don't know if people are looking forward to this or not, but Bears 49ers this weekend. I'm Sean Hammond, Shaw Local Bears beat reporter. Joining me as always is Michael Dwojak. Michael, how you doing?
Good. Interesting stuff to talk about. Obviously, we got a bunch to talk about. I don't know how much we'll break down this 49ers game, but a lot of interesting things just throughout the week, whether it was a press conference on Monday or, Thomas Brown's availability throughout the week, the OCDC availability. I feel like we got a lot of good insight over the week. So there's a lot of different things and different aspects to break down.
Yeah, if you haven't been paying attention, if you haven't heard, obviously Thomas Brown is the interim head coach. He promoted Chris Beatty, who was the wide receivers coach, to be the offensive coordinator. Thomas is still going to call the plays for the offense. Defensive coordinator Eric Washington will be calling the plays on the other side of the ball. And we get to see what this all looks like on Sunday against the 49ers of all teams, who on paper, 6 months ago, you're like, oh, that's a loss. But they've been struggling. So this is all of a sudden a winnable game. You throw in the interim coach bump that is real, and statistically, the last 10 years, these teams play well that first game after firing their coach. And so we got there's a lot of question marks, but I think at least the vibe from the players, from Thomas himself, like I think there's a lot of positivity in the building right now. And obviously it was a total 180 a week ago when things ended with Matt Eberflus.
Yeah, it seems different, doesn't it? Just like based on, and I think you're kind of getting to see ever since Thomas Brown became the OC. I feel like you heard a lot of players be like, he's just different, right? Like he speaks differently. Yeah. His approach is different. And I feel like we started to kind of get that, once we started to get him once a week for OC availability, and now that we get him more and more for head coach availability, you see what the players are talking about. He's very direct. He's like, he's like very, like, I wouldn't say that he's no fun. Like he makes some jokes here and there, which is kind of fun. Like he's serious, but like he knows when to crack a joke or has to clarify that it is a joke. But he is very down to business. He's very direct. You can see why the players would like that. And he seems like a coach. He seems like a guy who, who's just very direct and lets you know what's on his mind and what he wants from you, as opposed to, it seemed like with the previous regime, whether it was Shane Waldron or Matt Eberflus, maybe there was some concern about saying something, hurting feelings, or, being soft about it, where it seems like Thomas Brown is very direct and he's not worried about your feelings. He's worried about you becoming a better player.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking with Coleman Shelton, the center, yesterday on Thursday, just briefly, and he had worked with Thomas back in Los Angeles. They were both with the Rams together. Coleman played for the Rams for several years while Thomas was there. He wasn't ever his direct coach, but he was or his position coach, but he was, he's in the room. He was the assistant head coach. He was around. They got to know each other. They had a good relationship, it sounds like. And the thing that Coleman said that really stood out to me is that, when Thomas Brown stepped up into that first team meeting on Monday, you could hear a pin drop, and all the guys were sitting up in their chairs, and it's like the total focus on what Thomas is saying. And I mean, not to say that doesn't happen with other coaches, but at a certain point, the voice in the front of the room when things aren't going your way, sometimes the guys lose that confidence in it. They lose that willingness to listen to that voice when you're losing all these close games. And as Keenan Allen said, when you feel like you're doing enough as players. And so you hope that is going to lead to good results these last 5 games. I don't think, I'm not expecting them to go 5-0 here, but I think that they are going to play really hard for Thomas Brown.
Yeah, it seems like that's the biggest thing, right? Like the Matt Eberflus's message just wasn't landing. It seemed like it wasn't landing ever since that Commanders Hail Mary loss. You saw the way that they kind of responded against the Cardinals and the Patriots the fall a couple weeks. And it seems like offensively, at least, like the Bears responded. Obviously, it hasn't been a perfect performance by the offense the last couple of weeks. I mean, everyone talks about, and rightfully so, about the late game management, the tough loss against the Vikings and the Packers, but a lot of that comes from the offense being slow in the first half, right? In each of those games. Like, I know we're very much like, here's the latest thing that happened in that game, but the offense did not look good at the first half in any of those games. So I think it's a whole performance. I think it's, you really need to kind of look at the whole grand scheme of things, but it does seem like the offense at least was really fired up with Thomas Brown as its leader. And it's interesting to see how that's going to transfer over to the whole team now, the defense and the special teams. And, I think that's the biggest thing. If the defense can get fired up and kind of play at a level that maybe they were playing at the beginning of the season. I know you're without Andrew Billings. You're still without Jaquan Brisker and some key players like that. But I think if you can kind of get to the middle ground of where you were maybe with the Commanders, I think that this team can compete in the last 5 games here.
Yeah, I mean, especially the way that they played these last 3 went after Thomas took over as OC. Like, I really do expect them to be in all these games. I don't know if I expect them to win all these games. Sure. If you're joining us live here on YouTube, thank you. Hit the thumbs up. That's a great way to support the show. We would really appreciate that. Subscribe. Leave your comments. We will get to some of your comments. I see you guys in the chat already. It's great to see you and hear your Bears thoughts. If you're listening after the fact on Spotify or Apple, do us a favor, leave us a review, and keep an eye on our Twitter pages, on all our social media pages. We're all over the place these days. We will let you know when we're going to go live. We're trying to do Monday and Friday during the football season. So keep an eye out for that. We'll let you know. If you want to join the conversation here, you can see our faces. You can join the chat, get your comments in. I'll get to some of your thoughts right now. Actually, I see that Rick says it feels like it's been 2 weeks since the Bears played. I see Rick's got a new photo too. Rick is always joining the show. We appreciate you, Rick. Looking good in the new photo. Robert says it gave him time to get his blood pressure down. Robert also with an interesting comment here from over in the UK. This is going to be a 9:30 start for him. So that's a late one, man. Let's see what else we got. So Michael, you mentioned it. We don't have any update on Jaquan Brisker. He's still out. I've lost count of how many games it is now. I'd have to go back and see when they put him on IR. I don't know when we're going to get him. I don't know if we're going to get him back this season or not. Certainly, at least from what he's posted on social media, he wants to play.
Yeah, and I think he had a comment or a tweet earlier this week where he said he was back on the grass. So that's interesting. I know. I agree. I can't remember whether it was 3 weeks or 4 weeks ago that they placed him on IR. But you wouldn't put him out for this game. I mean, he needs to get some game action and that sort of stuff. So I don't think he's a possibility for the 49ers. Maybe you kind of get him back into the rotation, into the mix of things next week. But it's interesting just to kind of see every concussion is different, but you've got Roschon Johnson now dealing with the concussion. That's a repeat thing for him. I know he dealt with that last year as well. So it seems like, it's not groundbreaking. Concussions are a part of this game, but it seems that a bunch of, key guys are kind of, dealing with concussions. And it's interesting to see how their process is going to kind of factor into how soon these players kind of come into the game.
Yeah. So just going back to look here, they put Brisker, they put him on IR ahead of the Packers game. So that was Packers, Vikings, and Lions. That's 3. So this would be 4. And so the earliest he would come back to practice would be next week after this game against San Francisco. We'll have to monitor that as we go along. That leaves 4 more games on the schedule if he is able to get back that quickly. I mean, a situation like that where a guy hasn't played in 2 months, I think they're going to want him to practice probably for 2 weeks is my guess before you throw him back on the field.
Sure.
Since I want to get to what Kevin and Ryan said, but since we're on the topic, let's talk injuries ahead of this 49ers game, because they're all over the place. The other big ones to watch are DJ Moore and DeAndre Swift have not been practicing this week. We're recording this on Friday morning. We don't have the Friday injury report yet, but those are the 2 guys to watch. Those are the 2 big ones. Also, you mentioned Roschon Johnson. I mean, if Swift and Johnson are out, you got a problem at running back.
you don't have a running back. You traded Herbert away. This is kind of what we were talking about. Like, do you keep him for these types of instances? And now you have a scenario where, who's going to play running back for this team if both Swift and Roshan Johnson can't play?
So obviously, hopefully that situation doesn't play out. But if it does, you've got Travis Homer on the active roster. He is if Swift and Johnson are both out, those are two of your three running backs on the active roster, and the third is Travis Homer, who is never not going to be your lead back. I don't think they would promote Darrington Evans from the practice squad. They also have. They also signed Demetric Felton Jr. to the practice squad. He's a guy who was on the roster during camp. We might get our third year in a row where we have a Darrington Evans game where he just blows up for like 100 yards randomly and then disappears again for another year.
It'd be funny, but it'll be a tough task. I mean, it's not like the 49ers run defense is good, and it's not like this team has been running the ball really well. So an interesting wrinkle into things. And I think we're hoping for Caleb and for the offense to kind of look a little bit better. But if you don't have your running attack, I don't know how much that's going to help you here.
And Keenan Allen and Darnell Wright were both back full participants on Thursday. They've been dealing with some injuries. Both exited that Lions game at various points. Darnell had a knee injury. He did not come back in that game. That's why Larry Borum was in there. Keenan Allen had an ankle injury, but he did play out the fourth quarter. He did come back in the game. So yeah, keep an eye on those guys. Obviously, if DJ Moore is out, you're going to be looking at a big game for Keenan Allen, a big game potentially for Rome Odunze. Something to watch there with the wide receivers and running backs on the injury report this week. Okay, we'll get into our 49ers preview, but Michael, what we haven't had a chance to talk about this on the show. Obviously, yeah, Thomas Brown is here for 5 weeks at least at the minimum. But Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren talked on Monday. It was very much a Kevin Warren dominated conversation. I don't know how you felt about that. What was sort of your feelings as we walked out of the room and sort of digested what we heard from them?
It felt interesting because I felt like the consensus after the press conference was, what did we just listen to? And I don't know if Bears fans are feeling better after this, right? Like it started off with, what was it, like a 7-minute 8-minute monologue from Kevin Warren, just talking about all the different things and going for how great the position is going to be, which I guess I don't disagree with him about, but, getting into Thomas Brown and all that kind of stuff. And then off to the side, I mean, you just had Ryan Poles sitting there, right? And you had a lot of confusion. You had Kevin Warren saying, it's going to be a joint decision with Kevin and Ryan. But then he said Ryan's going to be the point guy. But then when he was asked, what if there's a tie or what if like each guy likes someone, Kevin Warren just said that it was going to be like, that's not going to happen. They're both going to agree upon a guy. So it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because I feel like at this point, I think you've seen a lot now, even with Hard Knocks. You saw Kevin Warren just kind of be there as opposed to like, it felt a lot of times we saw Kevin Warren at Hard Knocks. It was like, he was there just to be there, right? Like it was kind of like he wasn't involved in the decision making per se, but he was just kind of like giving his 2 cents, right? And it seems like I don't want to say that he's butting himself in. He's obviously the president of football operations, but the head coach hiring really feels like a general manager hiring, right? Like it seems like that should be something that he's controlled, that Ryan Poles is doing. And Poles just gave us a 2-minute like little introduction opening statement. He answered a couple statements. I know he said that, they'll talk more about the hiring he seemed like he wanted to talk more about it, once the season was over and once they were done with the games and that sort of stuff. But still, it felt very weird just kind of having Ryan off to the side there. His body, we can get into the body language all we want. I know that's been a major theme for us this whole season, but he was just kind of there. It felt like, and it was just kind of weird. It was just kind of like Kevin Warren answering all the questions, dealing with everything, as opposed to just being like, it didn't seem like there was a set game plan. They didn't even know if they were going to use a search firm or not. So I think that's all to say why I feel like no one really left confident, because I don't feel like anyone really knew what the game plan is heading into this coaching search.
Kevin Warren likes to be involved. He
Yes.
likes to involve himself is maybe a better way of saying that. And look, yeah, he's in charge of the organization. He's in charge of the football side of the organization. He's Ryan Pohl's boss. I get that. Like, he's going to be involved in decisions like this, but man, sometimes it just, I mean, he walks through the locker room every game. I know that was reported a lot on Thursday. That was not unusual. Like, he goes through there every game, but he certainly was sticking around on Thursday after that loss to the Lions. That definitely like set off some alarm bells in your head. Just me seeing that. I feel like, could you not put them separately? Could you not do them at separate times? I don't know. Like, I don't fault Ryan Poles for the body language thing. I know that's been all over the radio. It's like Kevin Warren went on an 8-minute monologue. What do you expect him to do? Sit there smiling the whole time? They just fired the head coach that you endorsed, not just when you were hired, not just to hire Matt Eberflus, but like, you stuck by him last year. You know, Ryan Poles stuck by him. He had the chance to make a move, and he did not. And so, yeah, he has to be obviously upset about that. We saw the way that we saw on Hard Knocks how hard it is when he has to even let end of the roster players go. Like, how do you think he felt telling Matt Eberflus that he was done? Like, I wouldn't expect him to have good body language in that situation. It's unfortunate that it would just be nice to be able to hear them talk separately and to get more of Ryan Pohl's thoughts, because he was his answers to pretty much everything were pretty quick. And like, they kind of prefaced it by saying, we'll talk about the search later, but come on, you guys know that's going to be what the questions are about.
Yeah, and it goes back to the whole organizational decision-making here, right? Like, obviously we talked in last week's emergency podcast about how did you need to let Matt go talk to the media while you were meeting yourselves, right? And then obviously let him and then fire him after the media availability. Like, is that a moment where you need to hear from Kevin Warren on Monday? You know what I mean? Like, you had like the McCaskies there, they're off to the side. This felt like a GM hiring, honestly, or even like a president firing or whatever. Like, you had like the whole brass and leadership there.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting where it really felt like that could have been a Ryan Poles Monday press conference, go over the firing, what's going to be the process, what are you looking forward to? And then maybe you get Kevin Warren involved after the season to talk about like, where is this organization going from here? What are the plans and that sort of stuff? So, yeah, it just felt like it just felt like there was too much going on Monday. Like, even like trying to get into Thomas Brown press conference was a lot, right? Like, just it felt like, oh, by the way, here's Thomas Brown. He's going to be the head coach for 5 weeks. Like, it was just interesting. You just kind of put them all together, and it just kind of feels jumbled and kind of not. It's not cohesive, which is something that we've been saying about the Bears for a very long time.
Yeah, no, I would agree with what you're saying, Michael. And you wonder like what this search is really going to look like. Okay, Ryan Poles is the point person. What does that mean to Kevin Warren? I cannot see a world in which Kevin Warren is he's going to be very involved in this. And I mean, if you're a Bears fan, I don't know how you feel about that. Like, how much is he going to be stepping on his GM's toes? Are they really going to agree? When they get down to the final 2 or 3 candidates, like Kevin says, they will know. Look, different people have different opinions. Like, you might not come to an agreement. And I know he said it took him a while to get there, but he eventually said that in that scenario, it's up to Ryan. Which is the way it should be. I mean, he's the GM. He's if anyone's going to get fired after making this hire, it's him. A couple of years down the line. But it just took him a while to get to that point. And I don't think it's crazy to think that they might disagree on which coach to hire.
No, and like it just feels like there needs to be some sort of like division, right? Like, I'm not saying that Kevin Warren shouldn't know what's going on. I'm not saying that he shouldn't like mind what's going on with the football operations, but it's just, I feel like Kevin Warren was brought in here to figure out the stadium situation, right? Like, he was brought in here because he did a great job with the Vikings. The Vikings stadium is considered one of the best in the country in the NFL, right? But look where that's gotten them, right? Like you keep flirting with the city. You have this Arlington Heights land. Now are you going to Michael Reese? Are you going to whatever? Like the reason why you brought Kevin Warren here was mostly to figure out the stadium. And a year and a half or 2 years into it, there's no progress, right? You own this large piece of land. So it's kind of weird just to kind of be like, well, Kevin, you have to figure out the stadium stuff, but you should also involve yourself in the football operations. Like it doesn't really make sense because, I'm sure Kevin Warren has been involved with this type of stuff, but I know he was involved in the Rams front office, but like with the Vikings, like was he involved with this type of stuff? And as a Big Ten commissioner, like he wasn't doing any sort of this type of stuff. So it's just interesting the need to involve him where you can just let your general manager, be the football operations leader, like he kept saying on Monday, but it just doesn't feel like that's going to be the case. And I'm really interested to see how that impacts the head coaching, search, whether that turns off some head coaches from wanting to maybe apply for the job. I mean, I know it's a NFL job. You got Caleb Williams secured for 4 years. So maybe you're like, I'll live with it because it seems like a really good position. But these are all factors into what this coaching search can potentially look like here in 5 weeks.
Well, that's what we said a couple of years ago when we said, well, they got Justin Fields, the first round pick. Right. The quarterback situation's figured out for now, and those things change. I want to get to this comment from Robert. He says, "Do you value the overseer type head coach with really good coordinators?" And then there's a follow up question here or comment. It feels like Flus wanted to be an overseer, like a CEO head coach, but didn't get the chance with everything that transpired. It's like, I would kind of agree with that second part of that. Like you can want to do that. You can try to do that. But at the end of the day, like when things are going wrong as the head coach, and I think I don't really fault Flus for this, but like when things go wrong, he knew that it was his job on the line. And so then you involve yourself with that. And I think it's really against human nature, against your instincts to still step back in those situations and let your coaches coach, because look, these coaches know that they don't get a whole lot of opportunities to be an NFL head coach. And you don't want it to flame out the way that it did for Matt Eberflus, unfortunately. I mean, he'll get a defensive coordinator job somewhere. But I don't know that he's ever going to get another head coaching opportunity. I would be very surprised if that's the case.
Yeah, it always felt with Eberflus that he was trying to be like a modern coach, right? That he was trying to be like a player-friendly coach. He obviously set up all these leadership committees and that kind of stuff. And it goes back to Robert's question of what I feel like the flavor of this coaching search is. You see Dan Campbell, and he's like a leader of men, which is obviously going to be
We've heard that term. We've heard that term a lot this week.
Right. It seems to be the buzzword of this coaching search at this point. Like Mike Tomlin is a leader of men. And I guess I'm kind of the mindset of like, I don't care as long as you do your research and you know what you're getting, right? Like if you do your research and you're like, Ben Johnson is a great leader. He was a great leader in Detroit. And obviously he's a great offensive mind. That should be enough, right? Like if Joe Brady is those things, if you want to go with Mike Vrabel, and you believe in his ability to find an offensive coordinator, Brian Flores, I don't really care about the whole leader of men. I don't care if you need. I would prefer it to be an offensive coach, just because I do think that you would want to be in a position for Caleb to have a Kevin O'Connell, a Kyle Shanahan, those types of coaches, just to kind of have that continuity to keep it going. But at the end of the day, I don't need a Dan Campbell who's going to scream at you and that kind of stuff in the locker room. As long as you're a leader and you're a smart offensive mind, I think whatever leads this team to success is really what matters. And I think that's up to polls. And Ian Cunningham, I saw people asking how involved is he going to be. And obviously it seems like Kevin Warren is going to be part of that too.
Yeah, we didn't get to hear from Ian Cunningham. Obviously, he's the number 2 to Ryan Poles. He's going to be involved. At the same time, he's probably also going to be interviewing for general manager jobs in January. And I don't know how that dynamic with those two situations playing at the same time, because Ian was close. He was a finalist for the Commanders spot. He's almost certainly going to get interviews and will probably be a finalist somewhere else I know the Jets have an opening. I don't. Is that the only GM opening at the moment? I can't think off the top of my head. Yeah, the Saints just fired their coach. They still have the GM, and obviously the Bears situation is what it is. Yeah, there's no reason you can't have both. I mean, look at Sean McVay. Look at Matt LaFleur. Those guys can run their offenses at a really high level. They were sort of the whiz kids, so to speak, of the offensive side of the football. And Sean McVay's a pretty good leader, man. Like his players play really hard for him. I don't see why that couldn't be the case. Just because you hire a Ben Johnson doesn't mean you're just going with the offensive guru. I haven't spent enough time listening to Ben Johnson talk. Like, I don't know. I've actually been thinking I need to start watching some of these coordinators during their media sessions across the league. Because I don't know what he's like in terms of the leadership. I don't know what he is in terms of putting a message out there. And that stuff matters when you're head coach.
And I agree with a couple of Robert's comments here. I mean, Matt LaFleur obviously is both. Like, he's a leader. The Packers believe in him, and he's obviously a great offensive mind. And I also agree with this thought that, if you're winning, you're going to be respected, right? I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that's the biggest thing that hurt Matt Eberflus, where your rah-rah speech and all that kind of stuff works when you're winning and you're finding ways to win. If you keep losing on last-second points, obviously you saw that in the Detroit loss with Jalen Johnson saying he needed to speak up at the moment, and obviously reports of it there being a confrontation and that kind of stuff. But listen, if you win, everything's good. It's kumbaya, right? And I think that's the most important thing. And if you lose, you're not going to have a good locker room at that point, right? Like, I just think that you need to find a coach who's going to be able to lead, but a coach that is also going to be able to lead you to succeed. And I think that's the biggest thing.
Michael, really quick before we move on to the 49ers game, you're in charge. Who are your first 3 phone calls? Who are you calling and seeing if they want an interview?
I think I'm definitely going for Ben Johnson. I know that he has a very talented group, right? Like, that offensive line is fantastic. He's done a really good job with Jared Goff. He obviously has a talented wide receiver and running back room. So it's kind of interesting when you're kind of like looking at the hot offensive names and you're just kind of like, well, how much is that because of them, or how much is that because of, the talent that they have out there? But I think Ben Johnson has proven that he's been able to do it for the past couple of years. I didn't like that he went against the running attack against the Bears in the second half and gave the Bears a chance to kind of get back into the game. But I think I'm definitely reaching out to him, number one. I've seen this floated around. I don't know how much they'll do it. If you can trade for Kyle Shanahan, trade him whatever they want. I don't know I think everyone is kind of looking far too into this. I mean, it's one quote unquote bad year for the 49ers is maybe missing out on the playoffs by like one game because of all the injuries that they have.
The standard is so different. Yeah.
Right. So it's just kind of like, I don't think that they're going to I don't think that they're going to trade him. I don't think they're going to let him go. I know it's up to the coach and that kind of stuff when it comes to coach trades, but if you can do it, I mean, I would do it. I would even look at Sean McVay. I know that he's kind of flirted around with doing media and that kind of stuff, but if you can get an offensive mind like that, I think you bring him in. And I guess I would look into. I'm interested in Flores. I need to see what his offensive game plan is going to be, who his offensive coordinator is going to be, how much he kind of learned from the whole Tua thing. Obviously, that's not good, but obviously you get second chances and you learn from your experiences. So, because I think there is a lot to having a coach who's a good leader, but he needs to have a good coaching staff, and I think that's the biggest thing. So I would be interested to see how much he learned from that.
Brian Flores is going to get another chance. Somebody's going to give him another chance to be a head coach. I mean, the record was too good to, he had back-to-back winning seasons when he was fired. There's plenty to criticize there. There's definitely some questions. If you're listening on YouTube, throw your top 3 in the chat. We'll put them up on the screen. Who are you calling if you're the Bears? If you're in charge of this Bears search, Michael, you gave us a bonus. You gave us 4, but I like it. I knew you were going to go with Ben Johnson. He is definitely on my top 3 list. We didn't prepare for this. I'm just kind of thinking about this as we're doing it. I mean, for me, I feel like Mike Vrabel has to be on that list. Yeah. He's a coach who won with his teams won with less. I don't think that Ryan Tannehill played really well for him. I don't think that Ryan Tannehill was an amazing quarterback. Obviously, that was the best stretch of his career. I think Vrabel is the type of leader that you're kind of talking about, where like, could he be a CEO head coach and let his coordinators, do their thing? Now, obviously that would mean like you have to nail the coordinator hires. And that's just as tough a job. I mean, you have to get all these things right. Here's the other one who has not been mentioned yet, who I'm going to throw out there. And I guess I might cheat too and go with four different names here, but I'm calling Pete Carroll to see if he's still interested. I know some people might be mad about that. I've always liked Pete Carroll. I've always liked the energy that he brings, like the positivity, the way that he runs his organization. Like that's exactly the type of person that you want, where he's letting his players be themselves. You can certainly question whether, I think he's 72, 73 years old. He's about the same age as Belichick. And I'll throw Belichick's name in there in the sense that, like, if you have 3 phone calls, you got to call the guy with 8 Super Bowl rings, if you count when he was an assistant. You have to call him. Like, the whole search is flawed if you don't at least gauge his interest, if you don't at least kind of just talk to him and pick his brain a little bit. Like, I really think you have to call him. I'm not saying I'd hire him. It's fair to criticize what happened after Brady left New England, but I think those two guys you need to talk to them.
Yeah, it's interesting with, both Pete and Bill. I would give them a call. I don't know if I would hire them. I think I want my coach I know you're not going to have your coach be around for the next 10 years. That just isn't the modern sports anymore. That's just not how things kind of go. But both guys are 72, and I feel like you just kind of need a younger guy, not to be an ageist here or anything like that. But I just think that they have a lot of experience, and I would interview them and I would pick their brain, and I'd be like, hey, like, what have you seen from Caleb? Like, what do you feel like what do you see in our processes and that kind of stuff? What are we doing wrong? I don't think there's anything wrong with interviewing them. And they obviously have, vast football knowledge that would be very useful for this organization. But I don't think you can hitch your wagon to someone who's in their early 70s when you have a young team that
it's hard to do. That's totally fair.
So I think that's my biggest hitch on them. I think you got younger candidates. I think there's a happy medium. I don't think you need to go with the super young guy, though. If you can find your Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, and you hear from leak sources that, like, this is your next thing, like, is Thomas Brown going to be that guy? That's obviously something we can talk about. But I don't know if I can get into bringing Belichick in here or bringing Pete Carroll here, having them leave in 2 to 3 years because they're 75 years old. And then we do this all over again. And it is just something that I don't think we need to do.
That's totally fair. I don't know if Pete Carroll wants to coach. He still technically works for the Seahawks. I don't know how much he actually does, but he's like a consultant or, has some made up title. And obviously we all know that Belichick is doing the TV thing, but he certainly sounds like he wants to coach. CJ says Thomas Brown, Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, who is the offensive coordinator for the Bucs. Those are 3 good picks. I mean, Cohen has Baker Mayfield playing at a really high level. I think he's 6th in passing yards right now, despite a bunch of injuries at their wide receiver spot. I think Thomas Brown is going to get a fair shot. He's going to have a chance to prove himself here. Rick says Flores, Vrabel, and Belichick. Mike Johnson threw out Dave Tobe, who was the special teams coach down with the 49ers. I saw somebody else mentioning Nagy somewhere. Not for Bears coach, but just that I do think Matt Nagy will get interviews at some point. I don't know if somebody will hire him. Maybe. Mike Johnson also threw out Deion Sanders' name, and that's a spicy one. That's
he going to the Cowboys.
He's going to the Cowboys. I think that's already a done deal. No, but that I cannot see the McCaskies signing up for that.
No, if you. We're like Mike Vrabel and Brian Flores might be like pushing the envelope for the McCaskies.
Yeah, right.
I don't think Deion Sanders is going to be it's interesting to see what he does. He keeps saying that he's going to stay at Colorado. If he goes, he's going to the Cowboys. If he goes to the NFL.
One more spicy one from Rick just came in. Gruden ? I don't think any team in the NFL is going to touch that one. All right, let's move on to our 49ers preview here. We kind of already talked injuries. The running back spot is obviously a concern. Hopefully, DeAndre Swift is back at practice later today on Friday. Michael, what is your game within the game when you look at the 49ers and Bears? What is the position group that you're watching, the one-on-one matchup? Who are you paying attention to in this game?
I feel like I'm not going to say this every week, but at this point, it's Caleb, right? Like at this point, it's just kind of seeing how much Caleb has continued to grow, whether those 3 weeks were a fluke or whether, I keep seeing a bunch of guys kind of saying that he can kind of get himself back into the, I assume they mean the rookie of the year conversation, right? Like obviously, Jaden Daniels has looked good and the other rookies have looked pretty good as well. But I think the biggest point at this point is Caleb continuing to grow? Is he taking the next step? And is he being put in the right step? And he'll get a good test. I know that the 49ers are injured and that sort of stuff. Maybe not as much defensively as they are offensively. But listen, they have a great pass defense. They're one of the top in the league. And without potentially DJ Moore, what is Caleb able to do? Does he get Rome Odunze involved more than he has in the past? Is Keenan Allen going to be his safety net up the middle? Is Cole Kmet going to be a safety net? So for me, I'm focused on Caleb. I'm focused on how he attacks his secondary. I think the offensive line, if Darnell Wright is able to play, has defended him pretty well here in the past couple of weeks. So I think the sacks should be low. But I'm really interested to see how his decision-making kind of stacks up against a fairly talented 49ers pass defense.
Yeah, it's really interesting point from Robert in the chat. Denver and Washington are on bye this week. So, Caleb Williams has an opportunity to make up some yards in that race for the rookie of the year. I've been saying this, for a few weeks. I don't think Caleb is out of that. Nobody is taught nationally. Everybody is saying it's a 2-horse race between those two guys, but I don't think I would agree with that. I mean, the way, obviously when you put up 3 points against the Patriots and you played terrible against the Cardinals and Caleb didn't really throw for a whole lot of yards in either of those games. Yeah, I totally understand why he vanished from the conversation for rookie of the year. But I think that if he keeps playing at this level for these last 5 games, there's no reason why he can't put himself back in that conversation.
And I think the conversation would be if they're different, if they're winning, right? Like, I think the conversation is much different if they even win 1 or 2 of those games, because the Bears were in a spot to win 3 of those losses because of him, right? Like he brought him back against the Commanders, he brought him back against the Packers, against the Vikings, and against the Lions. You can make the argument that they should have looked better in the first half, and that obviously plays a factor in the MVP or the Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, whatever you want to call it, race. But I do think that he has put himself back in the race. And I think the conversation would definitely be different if the Bears were winning more than they have. The Commanders have been winning.
Yeah, that's fair.
The Broncos have been winning. So
they're both in the playoff hunt.
And I think that the conversation will be, and that should that be a factor? Sure. You need to help your team win, right? And I think he's gotten them there. Obviously, there have been some late coaching decisions that kind of led to those losses, but I think if he can even help them, win against the 49ers, win one of these division games, I think it's a much closer offensive rookie of the year race than some people are making it out to be.
Caleb is only almost exactly 200 yards behind Jaden Daniels. He has 1 fewer touchdown pass and 1 fewer interceptions. He's about 230 yards behind Bo Nix, who has more touchdown passes than either of them, but 8 interceptions on the year. If Caleb has a 200-yard game and he throws for 1 touchdown with no interceptions, they're all even. It's statistically. Now Jaden is running around quite a bit more. He's got some rushing yards that the other guys don't have. And I think you're right in the sense that wins and losses matter too. And I don't think you can fault Caleb for putting his team in position to win some of these games, though. It's been pretty wild. Okay, my game within the game. This is I'm poking fun at the Bears, but my game within the game is Thomas Brown versus the clock. I think that it's going to be a lot better this week. We'll see how they handle the end of the first half. We'll see if they have the opportunity at the end of the fourth quarter, how they handle things going down the stretch. It sounds like he's kind of put Chris Beatty in charge of being his clock management guy. And it's interesting. I actually covered Chris Beatty way back when he was at Illinois in 2012. He was the co-offensive coordinator for the Illini. So it's kind of funny for me to see him, to be back in this position now as a coordinator here with the Bears. He's done a lot of different things. What's that?
That was a great team. 2012.
Yeah, 2012 Illini. Go look him up. They won 2 games. He got fired. So that's how that went. But actually, then 2 years later, he was resurfaced at Wisconsin, and he worked with Thomas Brown that year in 2014. But I'm going to throw this story in the chat too that I wrote yesterday, just how they're going to handle end of game stuff. I mean, Chris Beatty has coached like all over the place, college, high school, NFL. He's been a head coach at the high school level. Like, I think that matters, like when you're talking about game management. He's been, I know it's not the same thing as being an NFL head coach, but still, like, you're talking about managing the clock, managing your timeouts. And I think a lot of times when these first-time head coaches run into that issue, like Matt Eberflus did, it's because he never had to do that. Like, he's never done that in his coaching career. He clearly isn't the age where he was playing Madden and learning, how to handle the end of games. I think that's I say that jokingly, but that's like a serious thing. Like, if you grew up playing football, video games, you know how to handle the end of the game.
It's interesting, right? And even like comparing it to like our own lives, right? Like I know a lot of like reporters talk about how valuable their prep, coverage was early in their careers, because you learn you learn what to cover, right? Like, you learn what's important in the game, what's not important in the game, and that stuff matters. And it's interesting to see that he kind of put that on Beatty. It's interesting that it seems like Brown is very aware of what he can do and what he cannot do. Like, it's important to him to continue to call, offensive play calls. It's important for him to be involved with Caleb. So then he decided, okay, Beatty, you watch out for that. I don't think we got an answer on challenges. I know Rick asked about that question, whether he's going to handle that or whether Beatty is going to handle that type of stuff. But it just shows the awareness of, these are the things that I need to look out for. These are the things that are going to matter in a game. And maybe it helps because obviously that's the reason why Matt Eberflus got fired. But it's good to see that there's an awareness that stuff is really important and can determine whether you lose or win a game.
And I wrote it in the story. I dropped it there in the chat if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, like, that was one of the first things that they came up with a plan for, is like, okay, we know that the end of game scenarios, end of half scenarios under Matt Eberflus were terrible. We have to fix this. How do we go about doing that? And it's good to see that was a priority.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Our most valuable Bear. Throw your most valuable Bear for this week in the comments. We'll throw them up on the screen. Just to recap where we are at. It's week 14 of the NFL season. We've had the Bears had a bye week, so we've had 12 games. This is game number 13. Michael, last week, I used up my final Caleb Williams pick. He got me 26 and a half fantasy points. You went with Rome Odunze, just 3.5 points from Rome, not the biggest game. I picked up the victory. We are even 6-6 through 12 weeks in our best of 17 series. But you get to pick first this week. Michael, most valuable Bear against the 49ers. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm trying to, off the top of my head now, figure out when I want to use Caleb at this point.
You have one more Caleb left. We each get 3 times to pick the quarterback. You have 1 remaining. I am out.
I think I will. I'm not going to go with DJ Moore because he might not play or he might be limited. Do I go with Roman? I don't want to go with Caleb in this game just for the risk of. I still think this is a good 49ers defense. I think that they're still very talented. They can pressure a lot with their defensive line. So I worry about that a little bit. So I guess I will go with – do I go with I'll go with Rome. I'll do Rome again.
Okay.
I don't love my decision, but I'm going to go with him because if Rome has a big day, Caleb has a big day. Or if Caleb has a big day, Rome could have a big day. So I'll go with that. I'm going to save my Caleb pick for later in the year. But I do think that the offense could potentially get some things going. So I'll go with Rome Odunze, especially if DJ doesn't play. I think he gets much more involved in the offense.
I like that. If DJ doesn't play, I agree that Rome is a really good pick. I want to pick DeAndre Swift in this game, but like we said for DJ, I don't know if he's going to play, and so I'm not going to take that risk here on Friday morning. We'll see the injury report later this afternoon, but I'm not going to take that risk here. I was thinking, should I go somebody defensively? Maybe Montez Sweat, but I'm going to go with the hot hand. I'm going to take Keenan Allen. I think he's had a couple of good games in a row now. He looked really good. Obviously, that first half against Minnesota, he was really all over the place. Had a couple of nice moments. Scored a touchdown last week against Detroit. I do think that I'm a little bit worried about this 49ers defense. I know it's going to be tough, but if DJ doesn't play, I think Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze are both great picks, and obviously that seems to be why we're going with them.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of, how much that kind of plays a factor into things, but I could see him having a big game. And I can see a bunch of guys having a big game. That's the thing. Like, that's the whole point of the interim coach boost, right? Like, everyone's more motivated. Everyone's more into it. Not that they weren't into it before, but there's just a different sense out there, right? And you want to play for Brown. So I think there are a lot of good choices. And I think that kind of will lead into why we kind of feel the way we do about how this game could potentially go on Sunday.
Robert says Caleb all day. Mike Johnson says Caleb for 400 yards. Let's see. CJ has Cole Kmet. That's another guy. We could have gone that way. We could have gone Cole Kmet with DJ being out. We didn't. But he's due for a touchdown. We haven't seen him in the end zone for a little while. Rick is going Montez Sweat. He's going on the defensive side. I like that pick. Okay, surprise prediction. What's something we're not talking about that you think might realistically happen on Sunday?
I'm going to do my obligatory Tyler Scott prediction just to kind of get the crowd excited. Maybe he gets more involved. I don't know. We'll see. But my real selection is the Bears win a challenge. I am going to go with that in honor of Matt Eberflus's first game not in charge. I think that Thomas Brown wins a challenge, and I think that every Bears fan goes crazy because of obviously Eberflus's lack of success in that area.
6 consecutive lost challenges to end the Matt Eberflus era.
He almost won one last week.
He should have won one. He was going to win one. They basically said, no, you don't get to throw the flag. We chose to review this one. Right. He was going to win that one. I forget exactly what the scenario was. My surprise prediction is, I actually think that the Bears can run the ball well against this 49ers team. Statistically, like, you can put up yards against this team. That's the one area, like, they're really good against the pass. They're pretty good against the run. But I think that the Bears, assuming Coleman Shelton is fully healthy, he's been a little bit limited, but I think he's going to play. You got Tevin Jenkins back. Matt Pryor's in there at that guard spot. I think with a healthy O-line, you can run the ball against these guys. My surprise prediction is, I kind of touched on it earlier, I think Darrington Evans is going to have a big game coming up off the practice squad, put some yards together. That's assuming that DeAndre Swift doesn't play. I like Darrington. He's a really nice guy. And I think that this could be a moment, an opportunity for him.
I can see him stepping, especially if this offensive line is healthy and continues to play the way that it has the past couple weeks. I know they've protected Caleb well. I don't know if they haven't really run the ball that well, but I could see them having a better than expected day on Sunday.
They did not run well against Detroit. They really didn't. And that was an issue. Okay. Lastly, we have our prediction. Michael, do you believe in the interim coach bump? Who are you picking in this game? Give me your Bears 49ers score.
I feel like this is a fairly popular pick. I feel like everyone is kind of picking the Bears this week, obviously because of the bump. Obviously, the 49ers are slumping right now. They're very injured. Their top 2 running threats are on IR. A bunch of guys, like Ayuk is gone. You're missing a lot of talented players. So I'll go with the Bear. I think the Bear. I'll give it to them. I think
you don't want to do it though.
I don't want to do it, but part of me is kind of like, there's a bump. I think the 49ers are slumping right now, and 7 games in a row is just tough to lose, right? Like that would be a lot. So I think they go into the road. I think there's, some tsunami in the air or whatever. So I think maybe that kind of helps them or whatever. But I think that the Bears win 24-20 or 24-21, something like that. I think that they pick up a win. I wouldn't be surprised if they lose. I'm not entirely confident in this pick, but eventually they need to win a game, right? And I think that this is probably the game that they do that with a little bit of a bump and a slumping 49ers team.
Yeah, if you didn't hear, there was a tsunami warning in San Francisco yesterday. So hopefully that's over and done with. There was an earthquake off the coast a ways, but nothing came of that, thankfully. So hopefully there's no aftershocks or anything crazy like that, because I have a flight to San Francisco tomorrow, so I don't want to deal with that. The interim head coaches. I saw this stat before the Saints played with their interim head coach. They were 13-11 over the last 10 years in their first game after taking over. And that doesn't sound all that impressive, but you think about what the record of those teams probably was going into that games, and you're like, okay, there's a bit of a boost there. I mean, those are all probably losing teams. Some of them probably pretty bad record-wise. And the Saints won that game. That I think that might make it 14-11, something like that over the last 10 years. I do think that I think this is like a perfect storm. The 49ers are so beat up. They looked like they didn't even want to be there in that snow game last week against the Bills. Their running backs both got hurt in that game. Like you said, they've already been without several key players. I do think that the Bears get a bump here. I do think that the Bears win this game. I'm picking them to win this game 24-23. I think it will be close. I think it will be a nail biter and maybe even a Cairo Santos field goal to seal it at the end. The Bears they manage the clock well in the fourth quarter and they win on a field goal. Is that so crazy to think might actually happen?
No, I don't think that's entirely crazy. And I like your little storm pun earlier there. I don't know if that was intended or not, but
what did I say?
You said something like that. It's a perfect storm or something.
Okay, yeah.
No, but I agree. I'm kind of going off your point of usually if you're firing your coach, you're a bad team, right? And I know your record is what your record is and that kind of stuff, but I'm still of the mindset that I don't think that the Bears are a bad team. I think that they were just led poorly in a lot of late game situations. So I see some guys talking about this in the comments where I don't think that this is necessarily that tough of a choice to make, right? Like this is a team that has a lot of talent, and maybe this is just a team that finally, with a steady voice and good late game management, can get over the hump and pick up some of these wins.
Yeah, CJ says he thinks they'll be a little bit more aggressive under Eric Washington. Robert says another game without a pick for Caleb. That would be 7 in a row. Yes, the entire losing streak. Caleb has not thrown an interception, which is pretty crazy to think about. Mike has the Bears winning 23-17. CJ 24-17 Bears. Everybody's picking the Bears 28-24 from Rick. Thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate you jumping on here live with us. Do us a favor, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up on YouTube. Oh, I got to make the little thing go on the screen. There it is.
There it is.
We would really appreciate that. Head to ShawLocal.com. Read all of our Bears coverage. We will have plenty of stuff this weekend about the 49ers game. You can read everything that's happened with Ryan Poles, Kevin Warren over at ShawLocal.com. And please consider subscribing. That is the #1 best way to support us. He's Michael Dwojak. You can find him on Twitter at mdwojak94. I'm Sean Hammond. I'm at Sean_Hammond. We will let you know when we're going to go live. We are both on Threads. We are both on Blue Sky now. I took the plunge. I jumped in over there. So if you're over there, give me a follow. We'll keep exploring every social media opportunity we have. We want to meet you guys where you are. This has been the Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great weekend.